I parked outside the emergency department with my hands still gripping the steering wheel when my phone lit up. "Dad," I answered with a tired smile. "Hey, I'll head home, shower, and then drive over." There was a brief pause before my father spoke. "Olivia, don't bother." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "It's only dinner," he said casually. "Nothing special. You've worked all night. Go home and get some sleep." I stared through the windshield, watching nurses trade shifts beneath the gray morning sky. "But Emma said everyone would be together this weekend." "Plans changed." His tone was calm, too calm. "You've done enough for this family. Rest." Before I could ask another question, he added, "There's no reason for you to come." The call ended. I sat there listening to the silence inside my car, wondering why being told to stay away hurt more than another 12-hour shift ever could. I didn't know it then, but that phone call wasn't about protecting me from exhaustion. It was about making sure I stayed far away from the one family event I actually belonged at. And a beach selfie I posted a few hours later would destroy the lie my father had spent weeks carefully building. After another minute of sitting motionless, I finally started the engine. My body begged for sleep, but my mind refused to settle. Dad had sounded strangely rehearsed, almost as if he'd practiced saying those exact words before calling me. "It's only dinner." He'd repeated the phrase twice. My father had always been careful with language. He worked as a financial advisor, and every sentence he spoke sounded calculated. If he wanted someone to believe something, he knew exactly how to say it. I pulled out of the hospital parking lot and stopped at a red light. Almost automatically, I opened social media. A notification from my cousin Lily appeared. She had uploaded a story just 2 minutes earlier. I tapped it. The video lasted barely 3 seconds before disappearing. In that short clip, I caught a glimpse of an elegant ballroom decorated with white roses, gold candles, and oversized illuminated letters spelling out Emma and Daniel. My heart skipped. That wasn't a dining room. That wasn't anyone's house. That certainly wasn't only dinner. Before I could replay it, the story vanished. Deleted. I refreshed the page. Gone. I frowned and kept scrolling. A second cousin had posted a close-up photograph of flower arrangements with a small card that read, "Congratulations, Emma." That post disappeared almost immediately, too. I looked at the time. Something wasn't adding up. I sent Lily a message. "Hey, where are you guys?" No reply. I texted my aunt. "Is everyone already together?" Nothing. I even sent Emma a simple heart emoji. Seen. No response. The silence felt louder than any answer. For a moment, I wondered if I was imagining things. Maybe they really had decided to keep the gathering small. Maybe Dad wasn't lying. Maybe. No. If it were just dinner, why were people deleting pictures? Why was nobody answering me? Instead of driving toward my apartment, I turned toward the waterfront. Whenever life became too loud, I ended up there. The beach sat only 15 minutes from the hospital, tucked beside a quiet stretch of shoreline where hardly anyone visited during weekday afternoons. I parked, kicked off my shoes, and let the cool sand sink beneath my feet. The ocean had always been honest. It never pretended to be something it wasn't. Unlike people. I stood facing the waves until the knot in my chest loosened just enough for me to breathe again. Without thinking much about it, I lifted my phone and snapped a selfie. No filters. No dramatic expression. Just tired eyes, messy hair after an overnight shift, and the ocean stretching behind me. I uploaded it with one short caption. Beautiful day to finally breathe. Then I slipped my phone back into my pocket. For almost 40 minutes, I walked along the shoreline, letting the waves wash over my ankles. I didn't think about Emma. I didn't think about my father. I certainly wasn't trying to send anyone a message. But when I finally checked my phone again, the screen exploded with notifications. 37 missed calls, 23 text messages, 9 voicemails. My stomach tightened. My mother, Dad, Emma, 3 cousins, 2 aunts, an uncle I hadn't spoken to in almost a year. Even Daniel's older brother had somehow called me. Every message sounded strangely urgent. Where are you? Call me immediately. Olivia, answer your phone. What are you doing at the beach? My pulse quickened. How did everyone know where I was? I hadn't tagged my location. I hadn't mentioned the beach. I opened my selfie. Only then did I notice a familiar building in the background, barely visible over my left shoulder. The luxury waterfront event center. The same ballroom I'd glimpsed in Lily's deleted video. I slowly lowered my phone. The beach where I'd come to clear my head was only a few hundred yards away from whatever celebration my family had been trying so hard to hide from me. And somehow, one harmless selfie had thrown their entire plan into chaos. I didn't even hesitate. I hit my father's number before another voicemail could appear. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? There wasn't a greeting. No, how are you? No concern after seeing 37 missed calls. Just one sharp question. I'm still at the beach, I answered carefully. Why? His voice dropped. Which beach? The waterfront. There was another pause, longer this time. Then he spoke with an urgency I hadn't heard since my grandmother had been hospitalized years earlier. Stay there. I blinked. What? Do not leave. Dad. Don't come to the house. I wasn't going to the house. Then don't come anywhere near the waterfront event center either. The words came too fast. Too specific. I looked toward the elegant building rising above the dunes. Until that moment, I hadn't even considered walking over there. Now I couldn't stop staring at it. Why would I go there? I asked quietly. You just don't need to. His explanation never came. Instead, he ended the call. I sat motionless on the weathered wooden bench overlooking the water. For the first time that afternoon, I stopped asking myself whether I was imagining things. I wasn't. Something important was happening inside that building, and my father was terrified that I'd see it. As the wind pushed across the shoreline, memories I hadn't thought about in years began surfacing one after another. Not dramatic betrayals. Small moments. The kind you dismiss because admitting they hurt feels childish. Emma's college graduation. I had swapped 2 emergency room shifts so I could attend. Halfway through the ceremony, the hospital called because another physician had become ill. I left before the family dinner, apologizing over and over. Later that week, Dad joked to relatives that I was married to the hospital. Everyone laughed. No one mentioned I'd shown up at all. Then there was Emma's first housewarming. She and Daniel had stretched themselves thin buying a starter home. Without telling anyone, I'd paid for all the kitchen appliances as a housewarming gift. Dad announced to everyone that Emma and Daniel had built everything through hard work. I smiled and applauded with everyone else. I never corrected him. Recognition had never been why I helped. But being erased still stung. The biggest sacrifice came 2 years earlier. Dad's investment business hit a rough stretch after several longtime clients retired. My parents never asked me for money. They didn't have to. I saw the overdue mortgage notices sitting, unopened, on the kitchen counter during one visit. The following week, I quietly transferred enough money to cover several payments. Dad protested exactly once, then accepted it. Months later, when business recovered, he never brought it up again. Neither did Mom. It became another invisible contribution. Another thing the dependable daughter was simply expected to do. Emma never even knew. And I preferred it that way. At least, I thought I did. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my Aunt Karen. I answered immediately. Olivia. Her voice sounded unusually cautious. Hi, Aunt Karen. I wasn't expecting you to pick up. I've been trying to reach everyone. Silence. Then I asked the question that had been growing heavier every minute. What's actually happening today? Another pause. You mean you aren't here? No. I thought you decided not to come. I frowned. What do you mean? Karen sounded genuinely confused. Richard told everyone you couldn't make it. I was never invited. The silence that followed felt endless. When she finally spoke, her voice had completely changed. Olivia. What? He said you thanked everyone, but chose work instead. My chest tightened. I never said that. I know. You know. I've known you your whole life. You don't miss family milestones unless someone's dying in your emergency room. I swallowed hard. So, who told everyone I didn't want to come? Karen lowered her voice until it was barely a whisper. That's exactly what I'm starting to wonder. Before I could ask another question, I heard voices behind her. Someone was calling her name. She hurriedly whispered one final sentence before hanging up. Olivia, who told everyone you refused the invitation. The line went dead. I stared at my phone. This wasn't simply about leaving me off a guest list. Someone had deliberately created a story in which I had rejected my own family. Someone wanted everyone to believe I had chosen work over Emma. And suddenly, the missed invitation wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most. The lie was. I looked up from my phone and toward the waterfront event center again. Dad had ordered me to stay away. My aunt had just confirmed someone told the entire family I had chosen not to come. There was only one way to find out what was really happening. I slipped my shoes back on, got into my car, and drove the short distance around the marina. Within 3 minutes, I was pulling into the overflow parking lot across from the venue. Luxury SUVs lined the entrance. Valets hurried from one vehicle to another. A large white floral arrangement framed the front doors. Above it hung a tasteful sign. Emma and Daniel. Engagement celebration. I stared at it. So this was only dinner. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was the only thing keeping me from crying. I didn't march inside. I didn't want to embarrass Emma. I simply stood near the sidewalk overlooking the harbor, trying to decide whether to leave before anyone noticed me. The decision was made for me. Olivia. I turned to see Daniel's older brother, Michael, stepping outside with a drink in his hand. His face lit up. There you are. He walked over and gave me a quick hug. We thought you were running late. I wasn't invited. He pulled back, confused. What? I didn't know this was happening. He frowned. But Richard told everyone. He stopped himself. Told everyone what? I asked. Michael looked uncomfortable. He said you couldn't get away from work. I never said that. He blinked. You didn't. I slowly shook my head. I didn't even know there was an engagement party. For several seconds, he simply stared at me. Then he glanced back toward the ballroom. I need to make a phone call. Before I could respond, he hurried inside. Less than 5 minutes later, more guests began drifting onto the terrace overlooking the water. One cousin waved enthusiastically. There she is. Another smiled. Glad you finally made it. An elderly family friend approached with genuine concern. Everything okay at the hospital? I frowned. What do you mean? We heard you almost couldn't get away. I took a slow breath. I wasn't working. You weren't? No. Then why are you just arriving? I only found out this party existed about an hour ago. The conversation stopped. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It simply stopped. People looked from me to one another, silently comparing stories. One aunt quietly muttered, "That's not what Richard said." A cousin answered, "I thought Olivia declined." Another relative added, "No, I heard she was traveling." Someone else shook his head. "I was told she didn't support the engagement." Every explanation was different. None of them matched. I didn't interrupt. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply listened as the contradictions multiplied. The ballroom doors opened again. An elegant woman in a navy dress stepped onto the terrace. I'd met her only once before. Daniel's mother, Susan. She smiled warmly. "Olivia, sweetheart, I'm so happy you could come." I forced a polite smile. "So am I." She immediately noticed the tension. "Is everything all right?" Before I could answer, one of Daniel's aunts quietly explained what everyone had just discovered. Susan's expression slowly changed from pleasant curiosity to visible concern. She looked toward the ballroom. "Richard told us you chose not to attend." "I never received an invitation." Susan frowned. "Surely that's a misunderstanding." "I wish it were." She hesitated for only a second before walking straight back inside. The conversations around me became whispers. I could see guests through the ballroom windows, turning toward the front of the room. People were no longer paying attention to the engagement celebration. They were looking for my father. A minute later, the main doors opened again. Dad stepped outside. His smile disappeared the moment he saw me. For a split second, neither of us spoke. Then he forced a laugh, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Olivia." He spread his hands. "There you are." I looked at him calmly. "You told me it was only dinner." "It was a misunderstanding. I wasn't invited." "You've been busy." "I wasn't invited." He glanced around at the growing crowd. "We'll talk about this later." There wasn't even an invitation to decline. His jaw tightened. "I assumed you couldn't come." "You assumed." "Your schedule is unpredictable." "So you assumed I'd miss my own sister's engagement party without asking me." People standing nearby exchanged uneasy looks. No one interrupted. No one defended him. Dad realized every word mattered now. He reached into his jacket pocket. "I can explain." Before he could say another word, the ballroom doors opened one more time. Emma stepped outside, still holding her bouquet. Her mascara had begun to smudge beneath her eyes. She looked from me to Dad. Then she asked the one question that silenced the entire terrace. "Dad." Her voice trembled. "What exactly did you tell everyone?" Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply stood there, frozen. The music inside the ballroom faded into awkward silence. Guests who had been laughing over champagne only minutes earlier now stood in scattered groups, watching the scene unfold through the open terrace doors. No one knew whether the engagement celebration had ended. No one knew who was telling the truth. Emma looked at our father again. "Dad." He still didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me. "Olivia, this isn't the place." I folded my arms. "It became the place the moment you told everyone I chose not to come." Emma stepped closer. She wasn't angry anymore. She looked confused. She searched my face as if hoping I'd smile and tell her this had all been a misunderstanding. "You really didn't know?" I shook my head. "No. I never received an invitation." I thought. She stopped herself. "What did you think?" I asked gently. She swallowed. "Dad told me you called him 3 weeks ago." I frowned. He said you congratulated me in advance. I stared at her. No. He said work was too important right now. No. He said you didn't want everyone rearranging plans around your schedule. I never had that conversation. Emma's face went pale. She slowly turned toward our father. You told me Olivia said all of that. Richard remained silent. For the first time in years, silence didn't protect him. It exposed him. Emma stepped away from him and walked toward me instead. I've been upset with you for weeks. Her voice cracked. I thought you didn't care. I felt my throat tighten. I've never missed one of your milestones on purpose. I know. No, I said softly. You didn't know. She lowered her eyes. No. Around us, relatives quietly drifted closer. Nobody wanted to interrupt. But nobody wanted to leave either. Years of family assumptions suddenly felt uncertain. My Uncle David cleared his throat. There may be something everyone should hear. Dad immediately looked at him. David. It wasn't a request. It was a warning. My uncle ignored it. A few weeks ago, Richard called several of us. He looked around the group. He asked us not to mention today's celebration to Olivia. A ripple spread through the crowd. My mother closed her eyes. Emma stared at him. What? David nodded slowly. He said she had become difficult. I almost laughed. Difficult. He said inviting you would create unnecessary conflict. What conflict? David hesitated. That part he never explained. Another aunt spoke up. I thought Olivia already knew. So did I, another cousin admitted. I only stayed quiet because Richard said the sisters had worked everything out. I believed him too, someone else added. One after another, relatives revealed the same thing. None of them had intentionally hidden the celebration from me. They had each been given a different version of the story. Each version was just believable enough to keep them from asking questions. Until now. Daniel walked over and quietly took Emma's hand. What aren't we being told? No one answered. Then Daniel's uncle, who had been speaking with guests near the head table earlier, frowned. Richard. He looked genuinely puzzled. Weren't those property documents part of today's presentation? Dad's shoulders stiffened. Emma turned toward him. What property documents? The ones your attorney brought. I watched confusion spread across my sister's face. There were documents. Daniel looked surprised too. I thought they were wedding planning paperwork. So did I, Emma whispered. Dad rubbed his forehead. They're not important. They seemed important, Daniel's uncle replied. You introduced them before dinner. I felt something click into place. This wasn't only about excluding me. There had been another reason. A much bigger one. One of my older cousins quietly stepped beside me. I probably shouldn't say this. I looked at him. What? I overheard your father talking before everyone arrived. What did he say? He mentioned making the announcement before anyone had time to question it. Announcement. He nodded. I assumed he meant the engagement. But he also said once the papers were signed, he paused. Everything would finally be settled. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. The family beach house. The place we'd spent every summer growing up. The house Mom always called the heart of the family. The house I'd helped keep afloat after Dad's business slowed down. Property taxes. Storm repairs. A new roof after the hurricane. I'd quietly helped cover those expenses because I wanted the house to stay in the family. Not because I expected anything in return. Now I realized why my father hadn't wanted me there. If guests knew I'd spent years helping preserve that property, questions would follow. Questions he clearly didn't want asked. Emma looked directly at Dad. Please tell me. He sighed heavily. I plan to transfer the beach house to you and Daniel. The words landed like stones. No one spoke. He continued. I wanted to surprise everyone. Emma stared at him. You were giving us the house. Yes. And Olivia wasn't supposed to know. He looked away. It was simpler that way. Simpler. He nodded. I didn't want today turning into an argument. I finally spoke. I've never argued over that house. I know. I've never asked to own it. I know. So what exactly were you afraid of? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. The answer would have required admitting that he knew everyone would question why the daughter who had quietly helped preserve the home wasn't even invited to hear about its future. Around us, conversations shifted. People weren't looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at my father with disbelief. His version of reality was collapsing piece by piece. Emma slowly wiped a tear from her cheek. I want those documents brought back. Dad looked alarmed. Emma. No. She straightened her shoulders. If there are papers involving our family, I want everyone to hear exactly what's in them. At that moment, the attorney who had prepared the documents stepped out of a side hallway carrying a leather portfolio. He looked around at the silent crowd, then at Richard. Finally, he spoke in a calm, measured voice. There is something everyone needs to hear before these papers are signed. The attorney walked to the center of the terrace, holding the leather portfolio against his side. The celebration had completely stopped. The musicians inside had quietly set their instruments down. Servers stood frozen beside untouched trays of food. Every conversation had ended. The only sound was the ocean behind us. He looked first at my father. Richard, before these documents are executed, I need to clarify something. Dad's jaw tightened. This isn't necessary. I'm afraid it is. The attorney spoke calmly, without accusation. When we prepared the transfer documents, I asked whether both of your daughters had been informed. No one moved. You told me, he continued, that Olivia was no longer involved with the property and that she was aware of your intentions. I stared at my father. He never looked back at me. The attorney opened the portfolio. During the title review and supporting documentation, I noticed several years of payments toward property taxes, storm damage repairs, insurance premiums, and maintenance. He lifted several receipts. Those payments came from Dr. Olivia Bennett. A murmur spread through the crowd. He continued. Because of that financial history, I specifically asked whether she had been included in this discussion. My father closed his eyes for a brief second. I advised Richard that excluding one daughter from a public transfer involving a property she had substantially helped preserve could create unnecessary legal questions and significant family conflict. He paused. My advice was simple. Tell both daughters before making any public announcement. The attorney closed the folder. That advice was not followed. Silence settled over the terrace. No one needed anything explained anymore. Emma slowly turned toward our father. You knew. He nodded almost imperceptibly. You knew Olivia helped keep that house. Yes. You knew she wasn't invited. Oh, yes. And you still planned to announce this in front of everyone. Dad finally looked at us. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. I was trying to avoid conflict. I answered before anyone else could. You didn't avoid conflict. You moved it. You pushed it onto me. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For years, my father had always known exactly what to say. Now there were no carefully chosen words left. Emma covered her mouth with one hand. I thought she abandoned me. She looked at me through tears. I was angry with you. I know. No. She shook her head. I blamed you. She stepped closer. I kept wondering why my own sister couldn't make one afternoon for me. My own eyes began to sting. I would have rearranged every shift in the hospital. I always have. I always would have. She started crying openly. I'm so sorry. For a moment, neither of us cared who was watching. She wrapped her arms around me, and I hugged her back. Not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because, for the first time in weeks, we were finally standing on the same side of the truth. Around us, relatives slowly began speaking. I never knew Olivia paid for those repairs. I thought Richard handled everything himself. So did I. I believed Olivia had become distant. I feel terrible. One by one, people admitted the same thing. They hadn't ignored me. They had believed my father's story. Every version had been slightly different, just enough to prevent anyone from comparing notes. Until my beach selfie accidentally placed me only minutes away from the celebration. The photo had done something none of us expected. It proved I hadn't chosen to stay away. If I had known about the engagement party, I could have walked there in less than 10 minutes. The lie simply couldn't survive that fact. Daniel stepped forward and looked at Emma. We're not signing anything today. She nodded immediately. No. She turned toward the attorney. I'd like these documents withdrawn. He gave a respectful nod. Of course. He placed the unsigned paperwork back inside the portfolio. The transfer can be suspended until everyone has had an opportunity to discuss the matter fully. Daniel squeezed Emma's hand. I don't want our engagement remembered as the day your family was divided. Neither do I, she whispered. Daniel's parents quietly approached me. His mother looked genuinely heartbroken. I'm so sorry. You were welcomed by everyone here, except the people who should have welcomed you first. I managed a small smile. Thank you. His father shook his head. Families make mistakes. He glanced toward Richard. But deception isn't a mistake. It's a choice. My father lowered his eyes. No one argued with that. The reception ended early. Guests left quietly instead of celebrating. Some hugged Emma before leaving. Others stopped to speak with me. Several relatives apologized for never questioning the stories they'd been told. Aunt Karen held both of my hands. I should have called you myself. You trusted Dad. I did. And I shouldn't have. Uncle David promised something simpler. From now on, if I hear something about this family. He smiled sadly. I'm calling both daughters. That made Emma laugh through her tears. It was the first genuine laugh anyone had managed all evening. Over the following weeks, everything changed. The property transfer remained suspended. No one pressured Emma to accept the beach house. She refused to discuss it until everyone could sit down honestly. For the first time, decisions about the family weren't made behind closed doors. They were made together. Dad tried reaching out several times. At first through text messages, then phone calls, then handwritten letters. I read every one of them. Some apologized. Some explained. Most tried to justify choices that simply couldn't be justified. For the first time in my life, I didn't rush to make things easier for him. I answered when I was ready, not when guilt told me I should. That was a boundary I'd never had before. Emma and I began rebuilding something we'd almost lost. Not overnight. Trust doesn't work that way. We started with coffee after work, then Sunday walks. Eventually, we talked about the years we'd spent unknowingly believing different versions of the same family history. She confessed she had always thought I preferred my career over spending time with her. I admitted I had quietly accepted being treated as the dependable daughter because I thought earning approval was the same thing as receiving love. We both realized We'd been living inside stories someone else had written for us. Once those stories disappeared, we finally had the chance to write our own. A few months later, I found myself back at the same beach. The weather was almost identical to that afternoon. The same breeze, the same waves, the same stretch of shoreline. This time, I wasn't alone. Emma sat beside me on the sand, with 2 cups of coffee balanced between us. Neither of us mentioned the engagement party. Neither of us needed to. She smiled and nudged my shoulder. You know. What? If you hadn't posted that selfie. I laughed softly. I know. She shook her head. No. You don't. She looked out toward the ocean. That picture didn't ruin my engagement. It saved our relationship. I looked toward the event center, standing quietly in the distance. The building hadn't changed, but everything else had. For years, I believed belonging meant accepting whatever place my family gave me. That afternoon taught me something different. Belonging isn't about being invited into a room. It's about being valued enough that no one would ever imagine leaving you out. And if someone has to lie to keep you away, you were never the problem. That beach selfie didn't destroy my family. The lies surrounding it did, and walking away from them was the first invitation I was finally glad to accept.